Good morning. Thank you so much for joining our Cloud Foundations Bite-Size webinar today. We wanted to share our new service, Cloud Foundations, which we've designed to help accelerate the benefits our customers can realize from cloud solutions, particularly AWS. And because we like living on the edge, we're going to look at this solution from a top-down view. What is the market requirement and how do we think we can help our customers? And then do a whistle-stop live demo that shows how your engineers and your architects will, and your developers will consume the service and what they can do in the service. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce myself and my brave co-host Pete, who's going to do most of the live demoing. So my name's Vicky Glynn and I'm head of product at Brightsolid. So my job is really ensuring that our products and services deliver business benefits to our customers and also helps Brightsolid to achieve its vision of being the hybrid cloud managed service provider of choice in Scotland. So accompanying me today is Pete Cridland, Brightsolid's Head of Cloud Enablement. Pete, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Pete Cridland. So I joined the company 7 months ago, and with 7 years of experience in helping large companies to safely and securely manage their journey into public cloud, I head up our hybrid cloud program, in which Brightsolid will bring customers the best of public and private cloud in an integrated hybrid model.
Great, and I've popped our contact details there. Please feel free to get in contact with us after the call today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we see our customers experience in the market and why we've developed Cloud Foundations for that. So many of you today will already be using cloud. And certainly we all have an understanding about the way that cloud services have the potential to help organizations deliver innovation. So when I look at the technology trends of the future, cloud underpins pretty much all of these, from machine learning and AI to robotics to intelligent spaces and smart places. And certainly, while it's difficult to predict exactly which technologies will form the future, it's easier to look at the past. And when I sit and look at the technology trends of 2010, again, most of those driven by cloud, I can see that actually these have become pretty much what Vicky did in lockdown, from, everything on my tablet to, winning Netflix by streaming everything on it, to playing geolocation games such as GeoGuessr. These have become the normal technologies that we use in our everyday life. So certainly cloud drives the technologies of the future that become the normality of the future. So, hopefully when we're sitting here in 2030, we'll be looking at many of the technologies that cloud drives as things we're just used to in our everyday life. But when we look at some of these technologies, we're aware of them in the future, but many of us in our own organizations maybe struggle a little with getting some of these innovations in real time, and wanted to take a look at why that was. So when we see cloud projects in organizations, what we see is typically they start with a big idea, an innovative idea. So that idea might be to introduce some of that technology that we've seen, take advantage of IoT, take advantage of, AI, to take advantage of robotics, for example, or maybe innovative in another sense. It may be to do more with less, and maybe to scale your solutions as your customer demand skills, maybe to address demand much more quickly. So innovation in terms of how you address the marketplace as well. And these big ideas typically trigger a cloud program, and there's expectation and there's excitement about those projects. And typically projects start well because they have those big ideas and they have that certainty about where they're going. You find that developers engage in them, and we create proof of concepts, and organizations believe in the potential, and they really want to take that potential and make it live into their performance environments and their production. And And there's where we sometimes see some of the challenges. And certainly these are some of the most common challenges across all organizations, not just those who are beginning cloud solutions, but those who are fairly mature in cloud also face some of these challenges. So what we see is governance becomes a challenge once we are moving something from a test environment to a production environment. Cloud procurement and spend becomes a problem because that benefit of the cloud where you can spend as you like and have different people working in different cloud solutions and developing those, that becomes a procurement and a cost control question. Security, whether perceived or reality for the cloud, is a question and a concern of people as they move into the cloud. Compliance also becomes an issue. Many of the compliance standards that we rely on today to protect our organizations weren't necessarily developed in the cloud world that as it exists today. So being able to control and make sure you're compliant in cloud can be challenging. And then many projects have that resource, that cloud savvy resource at the beginning, and the developers working on them are good. But when we want to move them into production and we're needing to support things 24 hours against certain SLAs, that expertise and cloud understanding has to expand. And often you can hit lack of resources or lack of expertise in that area. Also, one of the big trends in cloud challenges of this year is that interdependency of, applications being interdependent, interdependencies across your hybrid cloud, interdependencies with other parts of your environment, and moving into production means dealing with those interdependencies. And also, as you expand from your first cloud your first cloud implementation, you may want to migrate other solutions into cloud and get the benefits as well. And then you need cloud migration expertise, and you need to understand how to use those tools. So those kind of challenges hit all organizations, and the results can be very different. So in the worst cases, these kind of problems start to almost stop the project in its tracks, and a lot of concern and worry and risk is kind of affects the project. And actually some projects, it's decided to go back to what and the word for that might be cloud repatriation, where we've gone into a little bit into maybe the public cloud and then want to repatriate into something that we understand and we know and we're familiar with all of those things, compliance, interdependencies, etc. Or actually sometimes slightly worse, what happens is the project doesn't get the red light, the green light internally officially, but it kind of goes on, and it goes on in kind of a shadow IT way, and that can mean that you're vulnerable because all of those protections, those compliance and governance protections that we have in our organizations, there's ways found around those, and often that can lead to a vulnerable cloud. What we actually mostly see, though, is a bit like this confused line in the middle, where because problems come up as the project starts to move into production, there's a lot of rework, a lot of refactoring, a lot of having to step back and fix things to move forward. And really, I see this as a plateau of missed potential, because when you're having to step back and fix things and readdress things and rework things and change things, is what you're doing is spending more time and more resources as you do that. And that means that you're using those up to do this rework rather than move forward in your innovation. So there's a lot of missed potential in this kind of scenario where a lot of rework has to be done. And what that missed potential means is you don't realize all of the big ideas and the things that you wanted to do at the beginning. So you end up with a cloud solution that maybe is working for you, but it never quite matches what you want to do. And that's really why we developed Cloud Foundations, what we want to do is help organizations accelerate into that cloud potential and realizing much more of that cloud potential by helping them set up the foundations correctly so they don't have to rework, go back and fix things, and they don't end up in this plateau of missed potential. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce Pete, and he's going to just take you through some of what those foundations actually are to get right, and also demo those. And I guess, the leaving thought said by someone much more eloquent than me is, a technology solution is really like constructing a physical building. You need that solid foundation. And if the foundation is not solid, there will be structural problems all the way through. So our foundations product is really to address that, to make sure you have a solid foundation to accelerate your cloud projects. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Pete, who's going to talk a little bit about that and show how that really works in practice.
Thank you, Vicky. Now, I'll just quickly grab the screen here. Okay, so before I get started with the demo, I've got a couple of very quick slides to set the scene. I promise I'll go through these fairly rapidly, which will allow us to actually spend the time on the good stuff. But it's critical to understand that cloud security and compliance are a shared responsibility. It's one of the key foundational aspects of working in the public cloud. The cloud service providers all provide the customer with a certified secure data center environment with hypervisor and platform as a service or software as a service offerings that are pre-secured. They also provide tools to enable secure deployment and consumption of the infrastructure, platform and software services. But the thing is that the flexibility of the public cloud, the ability to spin up your own infrastructure within the public cloud, means that the customer is, and in fact has to be, responsible for ensuring that their specific implementation at the virtual perimeter and also at the OS software and access management layers are configured securely. And that's the shared responsibility model. Now, the cost of getting it wrong is high. So we've all seen the news stories of blue chip companies, FT 100s, companies getting it wrong, exposing customer data. Here's a few stories up on the slide here, some big names here, all getting it wrong. This isn't inevitable, though, and in fact, with users of the public cloud, it's not even that common, because the thing is, the cloud service provider platforms are all designed to enable prevention of exactly the sort of breach you see here. They have security budgets that would make your average FT 100 company blush. The problem is that early adoption followed by a retrospective retrofitting of controls is always more challenging than starting out with the right foundations. So, starting out right, what do you need? Well, in order to start out right, you need an understanding of the challenge. It requires planning for that challenge and implementing the right controls. The alternative can be a knee-jerk reaction to remediate after the event, which often locks down the cloud to the point of eliminating the very benefits that have driven public cloud adoption in the first instance. The team at Brightsolid together have over 25 years of combined experience in assisting large customers, many of them in regulated industries, to adopt public cloud in a secure and compliant manner. This experience has allowed us to develop a cloud control framework, and we've mapped this cloud control framework to industry security and compliance frameworks. And it's this control framework that underpins all of our Cloud Foundation service offerings. So, what is Cloud Foundations in a nutshell? So, it's a ready-to-use, pre-configured AWS environment in a client-specific AWS account or accounts, which can be automatically provisioned or, in certain cases, adopted from a customer's existing accounts. It enables direct consumption of native AWS services with no barriers to the familiar AWS console, CLI, or API access. There's no abstraction layer, so it's the interfaces that your developers will be familiar with from spinning up a Playground account or perhaps attending an AWS training day. And it's all secured by a compliance framework with a focus on preventative controls, which are designed to actively prevent or remediate non-conformance in near real time. The key thing is that those controls sit outside the customer environment to simplify consumption and also prevent circumvention. And we'll see what I mean by that later on in the demo. But put simply, they stay out of the way and let developers develop unless there's a non-conformance detected, all of which enables developers to innovate with native AWS tools, but within the boundaries of the compliance framework. So what's within this compliance framework? What's pre-configured in Cloud Foundation? There are 4 key pillars to it. The first is managed networking. We provide a fully configured VPC provisioned out of the box with a familiar public-private subnet arrangement. However, the routing, the internet ingress, internet egress, and VPC interconnectivity are delivered and managed by Brightsolid. In particular, the public subnets are entirely managed by Brightsolid, including all resources within them. That means we'll manage customer egress with customizable endpoint whitelisting and ingress with load balancers provisioned and managed on behalf of the customer. And there's managed access to AWS software as a service and platform as a service services via the VPC. For our existing customers with a Brightsolid data center footprint, there's also dedicated fiber from the Brightsolid data centers to AWS with customer-specific virtual interfaces enabling interconnectivity. The next pillar is managed access and access federation. We will provide IAM roles based on the principle of least privilege out of the box as part of the Cloud Foundation's environment. We can integrate with your chosen federated access provider. So that can be Azure AD, it could be Google, it could be Okta, or it could equally be anything with SAML or OIDC capability, which enables you to bring your existing role-based access model with you to the public cloud. The next pillar is managed compliance. Now, as you would expect, full audit trails of AWS activity and config changes are enabled by default. But what we've done here is that they're centrally managed to prevent any circumvention or any tampering with those logs, with those activity logs. Compliance monitoring tooling is also deployed with an emphasis on preventative controls. So we are actively preventing or remediating non-conformance in near real time with acknowledgeable logging and alerting on non-conformance. Now, crucially, exception management is one of the key challenges for compliance controls and something that's notoriously difficult to deliver, even with native tooling. We've integrated exception management from the ground up in Cloud Foundations, which enables you as a customer to request exceptions via our service desk for resources that are required, for example, to enable public access, and enable it only for those resources that you explicitly request whitelisting. And finally, zero-touch deployment. So we provide pre-configured images for key operating systems, so that's Windows, Amazon Linux, and Red Hat derivatives. Now, these pre-configured images are regularly refreshed with the latest patches and are hardened against industry standards. They're also, when they're deployed, encrypted at rest by default. And they have agents configured which allow onboarding to Brightsolid managed VM or dynamic compute managed services with a simple addition of a resource tag within AWS. Okay, that's enough slides. You were promised a demo, and I'm going to start now with a demo of federation and RBAC integration. So if I quickly move my screen down now, and let's log in. You will see here that I'm starting from scratch. This is Azure AD, but this would, in your environment, be your federated sign-in tool of choice. Again, it could be Google, Okta, or any SAML or OIDC provider. And if I now click on the...
Sorry, I didn't understand, but I found something related. Do you want to know what OIDC provider is?
Okay, Google, stop. So, if I quickly go back now, right. If I now click on my Amazon web link within Office 365, what you'll see is happening is that I'm automatically associated with a role with limited admin privileges in this case. So there are a number of roles, each with least privilege access, and I have been assigned the Brightsolid Demo admin role based on my login credentials within Azure AD. Okay, so this role enables me to deploy, configure, and manage resources within the constraints of the compliance framework. Let's see what within the constraints of the compliance framework means. So I'm going to go into AWS VPC. This is the page, for those of you who are familiar, that enables us to manage the networking for our Amazon virtual private cloud instances. Okay. I'm going to very quickly look now at routing tables. So the routing tables decide which subnets are able to talk to what endpoints, what resources, and enables routing. You'll see that we have a public routing table and a private routing table. The public routing table, you will be unsurprised to hear, is associated with an internet gateway. The private routing table is not associated with an internet gateway, therefore has no route of egress out to the internet except via that provisioned by Brightsolid. So let's assume I'm a developer who's only allowed to deploy in private resources. And as we'll see in a moment, I am actually a developer who's only allowed to deploy in private resources. But let's assume that I want to get around that, and I quickly want to get some of my resources out to a customer or to somebody, a tester, on the public internet. So what I'm going to try and do here now is edit the routes for this private subnet and add in a route that will provide default routing via an internet gateway. So we have an existing internet gateway. As you can see, I've put in a default route here, and I am going to route all traffic by default out via the internet gateway. Let's click Save Routes. Now, as you can see here, what's happened is the privilege boundaries that have been put in place as part of Cloud Foundations have prevented me from modifying those routes. As I mentioned, all routing, internet ingress, internet egress, and interconnectivity is managed in Cloud Foundations by Brightsolid. So as a customer developer, I'm unable to modify those routes to allow any sort of exfiltration. So I'm a savvy user, however, and I know that in order to change this permission, I could take a look at IAM privileges and see whether or not I'm able to escalate my own privileges. So I'm now going to go into the IAM, Identity and Access Management Service within AWS. Now, on the top right, you'll see that I am using the Brightsolid Demo admin role at the moment. So if I now go into IAM roles, I can see all the IAM roles provisioned within this account. And what I can see is that there is one here called Brightsolid Demo admin. That's me. Let's take a quick look at this role and let's see if I can escalate my privileges to allow myself to actually change that routing. Now, this is interesting. You'll notice that this policy name is an AWS managed policy called Administrator Access. And Administrator Access, if we look at the JSON policy, has allow star on star. In other words, my role has, through IAM access, the ability to do anything within this account, and yet I can't. And the reason for that is because Cloud Foundation's privilege boundaries are not reliant solely on IAM privileges. They actually sit outside of the customer account, which means that they're proofed against this sort of in-account circumvention. There is no way for me to escalate my privileges via identity and access management because that permission boundary that prevents me is outside of the account. and there's nothing I can do about that. One of the side benefits of this is that actually these privilege boundaries stay out of the way. So if I were developing a new solution which needed an IAM role to associate with one of my instances, I would be able to create the IAM role, safe in the knowledge that I will be allowed to create the IAM role, but its permissions will be constrained to, at a maximum, the privilege boundaries that have been placed on my account. So there's no way to escalate privileges for net new resources within IAM role. Stays out of the way, lets me develop. Okay, so that's great. Let's talk about fun within a framework. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm a developer. I want to use native tools, for instance, auto-scaling. Can I do that? Well, let's take a look, shall we? So if I once again go into my account here, and this time I'm going to go into Amazon EC2, the Elastic Compute Cloud. This is where we would typically run instances. And if I quickly go into the running instances here, I will see that I already have 2 instances running in my account, which are the demilitarized zone instances by which Brightsolid manage a highly available ingress-egress capability for this account. Now, they're hosting a public subnet. I know I'm not allowed to mess around in the public subnet. I want to provision something in the private subnet, and I'd like to provision an auto-scaling group. Can I do that? Well, yes, I can. Just in order to speed up this demo, what I've done is that I've pre-created a launch template. And my launch template here creates instances called demo instances, and it is set up with a number of capabilities. So if we quickly take a look here, I'm going to modify template and create a new version. And I'm going to do this to demonstrate that I am creating net new instances with net new tags here. So the first thing that I want to do is that I want to use one of the Cloud Foundation source images. If I quickly take a look here in the AMIs, you'll see that I'm launching a Brightsolid Amazon Golden image. What that means is that that image has been pre-hardened by Brightsolid for consumption within this account and has a number of tools on it and a number of agents on it to allow rapid onboarding should we wish to actually provide a managed service around this account in production, around this instance in production. I will quickly check my default network settings. They're all fine. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the tag. So you'll see that the instances are going to come up with the name demo instance. Okay, and I'm going to change this name here to demo webinar. So you can see that I am creating net new instances with net new tags. Okay. Now, the next thing you will see here is that I've got a resource tag on here which says managed service equals true. Now, that means that when this instance launches, it will be automatically pre-configured to be activated within a Brightsolid managed service. So this is something I might want to do with production instances that I'm ready to bring into a fully managed service. So I'm going to now save this template version with these new tags for demo webinar on them. Okay. And I'm going to use that launch template in order to launch an auto-scaling group. So let's go into our auto-scaling group here. Let's create an auto-scaling group, and we will call this webinar group 1. I'm going to pick the launch template, demo instances, and I'm going to use the new version that I created, the latest version that I created about a moment ago. I'm going to quickly run through here. I'm going to adhere to the launch template. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure, because I know I'm only allowed to use private subnets, that I'm using a private subnet here to deploy my instance. I'm going to very quickly say I'm going to use a minimum, maximum, and desired of 1. I'm only going to launch 1 instance at the moment within this auto-scaling group, just for demo purposes. And I'm going to launch those instances. So when I click create auto-scaling group, will it create me an auto-scaling group? Well, let's have a look. There's an auto-scaling group automatically created. I have the permission to do that. I can see it's updating capacity. And if I quickly go into my instances here, I will see that there is indeed a demo instance pending. And if I give it a moment, we should have a demo instance launched and running. We could equally be providing here internal load balancers so that we can test load balancing, etc. We could launch RDS instances. And there we go. My demo instance is up and running. We can launch a number of different AWS services, including sort of auto-scaling, launch templates, elastic load balancers, application load balancers, network load balancers, as long as they are internal load balancers and internal resources. But let's say now, as a developer, I get a little bit overexcited. I've launched an auto-scaling set of immutable instances of my application, and I'd really like to get my testers out on the public internet access to those so that they can see just how cool it is and to actually start doing the testing for me. Now, within the Cloud Foundations environment, I would need to request that Brightsolid provision me a load balancer or provision me a reverse proxy within the public subnet to grant that access so that public internet ingress is enabled. But I don't want to do that. I'm in a hurry. I really want to get this up and running, and I don't want to wait whilst one of my security teams sign off the approval for internet ingress. So I'm going to launch myself my own reverse proxy instance. So going through here, I'm going to launch an instance. I will select Amazon Linux 2 AMI. I'll use a TT Micro, no sense spending too much money. And of course, I'm going to want to make sure this is in a public subnet, pub 1A here. And it's going to need a public IP because obviously it's going to need access to the internet. Great. So I'm going to launch my instance. I'm going to add storage. I don't want to be caught out. I know there's a bunch of permission boundaries and I know that there are a bunch of compliance checks in here. So I probably better make sure that this is encrypted. So I'll use a default encryption key. I'll add my tags. So let's name it. And I'll give it the name reverse proxy webinar. So I'm launching a reverse proxy. I'll configure myself a security group. We'll, for the time being, just create a new Launch Wizard security group, and I'm going to click Review and Launch. Okay, so this is going to try and launch an instance that has been pre-encrypted, so it's not going to fall foul of that, and I'm going to launch it into a public subnet. It's going to need a key pair, so I'm going to use an existing key pair. I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to click Launch Instance, and away it goes. And it's launched an instance. Brilliant. I've successfully circumvented the ability to actually run this. Except that I haven't. If you look very carefully here, you'll see my reverse proxy webinar, which was attempted to be put into the public subnet, is automatically shutting itself down. So I can try and provision something, but it will be auto-remediated pretty much in real time. I cannot launch something in the public subnet. Now then, let's go to the biggie, the one from our earlier slide. Let's look at S3. Maybe I can provide external access that way. So let's go into S3 here. And let's quickly create a bucket. We'll call it PS Webinar Bucket 1. We'll make sure it's in London. I don't want to be caught out with encryption, so I will encrypt this. I'll select key. But I want to make sure that my developers and my external teams can actually access this. So I know this isn't the right thing to do, but I'm going to temporarily enable public access. So let's click that and let's enable public access. So I'm going to go away and create the bucket here. Now, as you will see, this has created a bucket, and as you can see, this currently says objects can be public. Brilliant. I appear to have got away with this. Let's just quickly see. You will now note that this says bucket and objects not public. If I quickly go in here, I will see that it has been auto-remediated, and now block all public access has been enabled. The compliance rules have auto-remediated this and prevented me from putting that into a public environment. Now, okay, fair enough. Let's see what happens if I do try to circumvent the encryption rules. So I'm going to create a new bucket. I'm going to call it PS Webinar Bucket 2. And this time, I'm going to forget to put on default encryption. I will block public access because I know I can't get away with that already. And I'm going to click Create Bucket. Now, obviously, this time it says buckets and objects not public. And if I quickly go into my bucket now and look at the properties, I will see that there's no default encryption on there. However, if I give it a few seconds, look at that. It's been auto-remediated. So my bucket has automatically remediated, and we now have default encryption enabled on this bucket. So any resources spun up in this bucket will by default be encrypted with a AWS KMS key management service key. So it's worth reiterating at this point that a simple ticket to Brightsolid to request a public S3 resource will start a change management process that's once it's been approved through your change management, and once your security team have approved it, will result in an exception which will allow a public bucket to be created. But again, only if we go through the request process and only if we get approval through your chosen approval mechanism, at which point we will indeed put in an exception for you. As I said, exception is baked in from the get-go. Now, back at my developer, I'm slightly concerned that I might be in trouble here. Let's be honest. So far today, I've tried to launch an instance in a public subnet and it's been shut down on me. I've tried to launch an S3 bucket that has public access and it's been shut down on me. And I've accidentally launched an S3 bucket that doesn't have any encryption on it, and that's been auto-remediated. Oh dear. So let's have a look and see whether or not I am in fact in trouble. I'm going to go to AWS Security Hub. And what we will find in Security Hub is that when I click on findings here, look at this. Just over the last few minutes, indeed, over 4 minutes and 2 days ago, it's detected the launch of an unauthorized public instance. It's detected the launch of a public S3 bucket. And it's detected the launch of an unencrypted S3 bucket. And if I quickly open up this, we can even see that it has got the information on which particular bucket it was I launched that was originally launched unencrypted. So I can go in and remediate that. So that's unfortunate. It looks like I've got some explaining to do. Perhaps if I very quickly go through here and if I quickly resolve these instances so that they can no longer be seen by my security team, well, there's a surprise. Unfortunately, the permission boundaries mean that I cannot resolve these. The only way for them to be automatically resolved and remediated is for my security team to go in and look at them. So it looks like I'm going to have to explain myself after all. So finally, I'd just like to quickly touch on the benefits of zero-touch deployment. Okay, I mentioned that when I launched my instances earlier, I launched them using a default. I launched them using a default instance type. I launched them using an encrypted AMI, so you'll see this BSOL Amazon 2 golden. Now, this golden image is pre-configured to be onboarded with the right tags to a Brightsolid managed service. And again, if I look at my tags, I put in here managed service equals true. What that means is that this instance should have been automatically onboarded. Now, let's just take a look at one service that it would be onboarded to. Brightsolid's cloud-ready monitoring system. We use a system called Datadog. Now, monitoring and managed services are a topic in and of themselves. So I'm not going to talk about those today. But what I will do is I will quickly demo this and show you. Here is a list of infrastructure in our demo account here, or that has been running in our demo account. And if I quickly refresh this, what we should see is that, yes, if I look here, I can see demo webinar. So the demo webinar tags that I put in have launched an instance. I can see that's 08DBB, and as you'll know, instances are launched with unique IDs, and there's the demo instance I launched, 086DBB. So that has indeed been launched, and it has been automatically onboarded to our monitoring. So if I quickly inspect that, you can see that that's been tagged with environment demo. Hang on a second. Let me take the right one. If I click on this customer, it's been tagged with the customer demo webinar, as I mentioned. It's in the environment demo, and that's the host that we looked at. We can add additional tags, but this tag allows us to actually look at a customer's resources in the round. And if I quickly look on here, you'll see that this instance has been collecting performance and monitoring data. So we with our managed service can see load averages, CPU, memory breakdown, etc., and all of the good stuff that we need to provide a managed service for that specific instance. Okay, so that's the end of the demo. That's everything I've got to show you at this particular point in time. So I think it's probably worth me giving a quick take-home message here. So the first and most important thing is that building a framework for secure public cloud is challenging. If you do too little, you compromise on security. And if you do too much, then what happens is you end up stifling the very innovation that you were hoping to achieve by moving into public cloud. And that's why Brightsolid have developed a secure framework for consuming AWS, which allows rapid deployment of a cloud environment, which enables that public cloud innovation, but without compromising on security. It's built from the ground up, based on our compliance framework to address the key challenges that public cloud adopters face, which means that you can get on with the important work of adding value to your business without the time, expense, and complexity of developing a framework at the appropriate level to secure your public cloud investment whilst enabling innovation. So be it rapid prototyping, consumption of cloud-native services, deployment of dynamically scalable services, Cloud Foundation enables that native consumption of AWS with managed compliance built in from day one. And thank you very much for your time. I'll hand you over to Vicky, and we'll take any questions.
Yeah, I'm just going to pause the recording just to protect anyone who asks any questions on the call. If you would like to ask a question of us privately, you can definitely contact us via our website at www.brightsolid.com or at inquiries@brightsolid.com, and we'll respond to you there. For anyone else on the call, we'll open it for questions now. Thank you.